Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, as we were talking about just before the podcast started, like you're a channeler and you have such a wide array of things that you talk about. And we were just talking about, I think maybe it's best to just go into I was watching this channeling of yours about World War III that was filmed just like at the very beginning of this year and this like kind of crazy time that we're in. And I really wanted to ask you just here on this call, like, can you give us, for everyone listening, just like an overview of like what you're seeing and what you're describing, what you're channeling says about this time that we're in right now, and then what's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I channel from a variety of different sources. Sometimes I channel just from pure source consciousness in the universe. Sometimes I channel from my higher self, my own Akashic records, and sometimes I channel from interdimensional beings. And for this time right now that we're in, one of the main sources that I've been channeling from is, an organization called the Galactic Federation of Light. And specifically, there is a council within the Galactic Federation that's called the Palladian Security Council, or at least that's what I call them. And they basically deal with all security matters surrounding planet Earth. So in the past, they've told me about the volcano that erupted in Hawaii, a giant Arctic ice shelf that broke off in Antarctica. And this was all before those kind of events happened. So that's kind of the things that they reference to, but they also make reference to timeline shifting, right? And where we are in our timeline and what's to come, and those kind of things. So that's kind of been my main source of information throughout, this crazy world that we're in right now. And one thing that they told me, and I think this was back in 2017, 2018, was they told me about the timelines that we're in. And basically they said between 2016 and 2019 was a huge timeline to push light workers and healers and teachers into their mission, right? So what I like to say is between 2016 and 2019, if you're listening to this and you had some sort of major collapse, major ego death, you let go of your job, you changed your relationship, you moved to a different state or a different country or a different place, it's a pretty good indication that you are one of these teachers, healers, light workers on a mission, and you basically had to collapse your own reality to get prepared to help the rest of the world collapse their reality, right? And I know personally that I went through a huge transformation between that time period, and they told me that back then. And then at the same time, around 2017, 2018, they also told me that the next timeline that we're going to be entering into is the timeline between 2020 and 2024. So we've got this 4-year period that we're in right now, first year of this. And they said that this was a period for the rest of the world to collapse this old paradigm, to collapse this old reality, to collapse the 3D world that we've been living in, because we are ascending, right? And I think we know that, right? Here we are, we're moving our vibrational frequency. And there are many different interdimensional beings that are helping us ascend and move into this higher vibrational plane of existence. And before we move into 5D, before we move into this new Earth frequency, we need to collapse and destroy the old Earth frequency because it's no longer serving. Actually, it was never serving us as a collective. It was only serving that top 1%. So here we are, right? The first year of the 4-year-long collapse. And so I get this question all the time, Elizabeth, when can we fully expect to neutralize into this new vibration? When can we fully expect for the rest of the planet to be at 5D frequency? And what I feel is it's not going to happen until after this 4-year period. We can't collectively rise into 5D if we're still destroying the 3D. So individually, we are able to ascend, right? But we're still competing against 8 billion other people who have not ascended yet because we're still in the collapse, which means education, politics, economics. These are all systems that we have to collapse and essentially reform before moving into this new vibration. So once again, we're not going to see that full shift until at least after 2024. And that's when I believe too that we're going to see, worldwide cosmic disclosure and other insights that are going to come through to us that are just kind of waiting in the sidelines right now.
Wow. I have so many questions. This is fabulous. Okay. I love that you talk about Ascension, and because this is something that it's like is built into our mystery school. We've done workshops about dimensional shifts and everything and all of this stuff. But, the conversation of like what is 5D comes up a lot, because it's like, okay, hold on. Are we, it's like, are we physically shifting into another dimension, or is our consciousness expanding into another dimension where we have, it's like we're in 3D, but we're also in 5D and we're telepathic? Or are we like just pure like beings of light floating around in some sort of primordial higher frequency? It's like a lot of questions. Like what can you glean for us on that subject?
For sure. And I get this question all the time, right? I think because we're in 3D, right, trying to perceive a higher vibrational state, it's very difficult for us to wrap our heads around. And I think a lot of people just automatically assume that all of a sudden, one day, we're going to be lifted off this planet, transported to another planet, and we're going to be living in 5D. And what I tell people is, look around you. Your living room is going to be the same, right? You're still going to have food in the fridge that you're going to be eating, right? I mean, your physical reality in a lot of ways is going to be similar, but not always the same. So energy, moves at the speed of light, if not even faster than that. And when we ascend, it's our energy that ascends first. So I can't say that the shift from 3D, 4D to 5D is just all energy, because energy affects the physical, right? So I believe that our energy and vibration, and especially our perception on the world around us, is going to shift first into that 5D vibration. But eventually, I highly, highly, highly believe, and have experienced it and seen it and witnessed it, that our physical reality is going to shift as well, only after we start shifting the vibration. Once we've shifted the vibration, and not at a place where we're 5D all the time, because we're going to be flip-flopping. Even the light workers are going to be flip-flopping for the next couple of years. So that's okay. But once we're in that higher vibration for long enough, that's when things like our job, all of a sudden we get fired from our job and we're like, what? This was stability. This was a paycheck. Oh, but you hated it? Okay, cool. Well, that wasn't aligned to your new vibrational frequency. So the actual physical things in our life are also going to shift. They're still going to be physical, but they're going to shift to align to 5D. And physically, how we can perceive our physical reality shifting into 5D is just more harmony, is just more harmonious. Right? Just aligning to a higher vibration that serves us as a whole individual, both energetically and physically, but then it serves the collective as well, both energetically and physically. And then I also truly, truly, truly believe, and many of us are having symptoms every day of this, that our physical bodies are also shifting at a cellular level into this new vibrational frequency. Of course, we still have physical bodies, but I believe that things like aging isn't really going to be as daunting, isn't really going to be, it's not that aging is going to go away, but I've seen people reverse aging, throughout their awakening process. I've seen people drop 100 pounds throughout their awakening process, not by doing anything differently, just by moving to a new vibration, right? And so other things like your diet's going to naturally change as long as you're listening. I believe that we don't even have to eat as much food moving into this new 5D vibrational state, because higher vibrations are less dense energetically. I believe our bodies are just becoming less and less dense. And I believe that the traditional concepts within physics of space and time that we recognize and realize and witness right now in 3D are going to be very different. And the really cool thing is, I was just saying this video the other day, who here believes that 2020 has been this really weird time warp, right? Sometimes I look back at the year of 2020 and I'm like, feels like the whole year was just in 2 weeks and it all happened at once. And sometimes it feels like 2020 has gone on for 10 years, right? Time in general has been weird. And it's only going to get more and more weird. Glitches in the matrix, right? Weird things, changing places, and Mandela effects. They're getting weird, right? And it's because our physical reality is becoming more lucid and not as linear in 5D frequency.
Whoa. This is so good. This is, I mean, what do I even ask from here? This is amazing. You mentioned the Mandela effects too, of like, that really speaks to, does this resonate even with you, of like, we're like hopping between different realities where in one, Nelson Mandela died at this age and then he died here. Pikachu had a black tail, now he didn't, like different versions of the same existence that we're all kind of like moving through. It's
So let me give you a good example of a Mandela effect. And I just, put out this video the other day and I said, 5D frequency is the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is 5D. We need to realize that we're flipping in and out of these different parallel realities. So I have this really cool example that happened like years ago, because I've been talking about different realities and Mandela effect at least since 2016, 2015 now. And I had a client of mine back then, and I was really working with her and talking about these concepts. And she's like, well, I'm moving to 5D. My husband's in 3D. And this is a very common experience that a lot of couples are having, especially during quarantine, especially at this time. We've got this shifting and polarizing of vibrations, even in our own family, in our own households, which is, it's got to be tough, right? And so, years ago, this client of mine, she had a great session with me. Then she went home and she had this amazing conversation with her husband, who never really talks about things, right? And they just talked about all this stuff and, emotions and feelings and things that they've never really touched upon before. And she texted me and she said, oh my God, I just had an amazing conversation with my husband. This is great. I mean, he's clearly shifting. You told me that he was going to shift with my vibration shift. I'm like, great. Then the next day, she calls me in the afternoon, freaking out. She's like, oh my God, Elizabeth, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, what? She's like, my husband's not the same husband. And I'm like, what? And she said, so they had this great conversation. They went to bed. They both got up the next morning and they went grocery shopping together. And on the way, driving to the grocery store, she turns to him and says, wow, like what a great conversation we had last night for like 4 hours. And he turns to her and says, what conversation? I just watched my TV show and you went to bed. And she's like, what? You don't remember the conversation? Like we had this conversation for 4 hours, right? So when she told me this, she's like, what's happening? Like, should I be worried? Where did my husband go? Like, like, am I going crazy? I didn't know at the time. So I tapped into the energy.
He's been abducted by aliens.
Turns out he's a clone. No. Turns out the night before, right, he shifted into 5D frequency with her. And they had this great conversation. When they went to bed, she woke up still in 5D, remembering everything that happened in the 5th dimension frequency the night before. He woke up in the 3rd dimension frequency. That reality the night before did not exist for him because he woke up in a different vibration.
Fascinating.
Right?
That's
how the Mandela effect works.
Amazing. So then, I mean, it almost like it calls on us to ask, like, which reality is the 5D one? Which one is the 3D one? Right? It, like for all of these Mandela, there's so many. We made a video. We're doing the conspiracy theory of everything right now, and one of them talked about Mandela effects and just like how many different ones there are, and it's like the way that we kind of framed it was like shifting in between, just like kind of different states as a species, and like how is this happening? But I really like that description. So even with the first one with Nelson Mandela, it's like, did he physically die in 3D at this point, but then he was still alive in 5D at this point? Would that be kind of like maybe how it worked?
Right. But we take a look at all of the different parallel realities that are currently simultaneously coexisting. There's an infinite number of parallel realities, right? It's easier to comprehend to say, oh, there's one and then there's another, right? So, and we can even talk about the third density, fourth density, fifth density, but even in between all of the densities are all of the layers of all of the different parallel realities that could potentially exist. So it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, especially when we're talking about Fruit Loops and the way that it's spelt and the decision that was made back then, right? So it's not one's better or the other's better. It just means that we're kind of collectively in this state of flux, where everything is pretty lucid, and depending on our observation, we're changing the reality around us. And it's easy to pinpoint these Mandela effects collectively because so many eyes are on it. But we need to also realize that we're flipping and hopping in and out of different parallel realities individually in our own lives as well. And they're much more subtle and much more difficult to pinpoint because it's only you and you think you're crazy. You're like, what? Wasn't that tree in my backyard over there instead of over there? People are getting these weird things happening at an individual level, and it's tough to validate because they may have a partner who always remembers the tree over there when they're sure that it wasn't there before.
Yeah. It's kind of like the like if you have a big 6 on the ground and there's one person standing at the top of it and then one person at the bottom of it. One guy says 6, the other says it's 9. They're both right, but it's two different angles of perception in this sort of quantum reality field. And it seems almost like quantum computing, where a quantum computer will, like, instead of normal computers are like 1 or 0, it's on or it's off, and the quantum computer is like, is it a 1 or a 0? Yes, it's because it's like just occupying both spaces at the same time. So that's it's like this understanding is just, it really has the capacity, and maybe this is part of what you're even speaking about, of this like shifting of awareness over the next 4 years. It's like this sort of global awareness that reality is like this flux field instead of like a stable fixed thing that exists.
Absolutely. And if we kind of touch upon quantum physics a little bit more, you've got the particle state and you've got the wave state. The particle state is just where everything's physical, right, in this present moment. And you look at your desk and it looks like a physical desk. And then the wave state is actually when you're not observing the desk in front of you. And technically, according to quantum physics, when we're not consciously observing something, it exists in this wave state where it exists everywhere all around you simultaneously. And I believe that as we raise the vibration collectively of the planet, we're getting more and more and more into this wave state. And one thing that I would recommend for people moving into 5D is letting go of any sort of attachment, expectation, or labeling system, right? Like I even tell people, if you wake up every morning and you pour yourself a cup of coffee and you're like, well, this is what I do every morning because I'm a coffee drinker, right? I really implore people to stop in that moment and ask themselves, do I really want coffee this morning? Or do I want tea? Or do I want hot chocolate? Or do I want something else instead of this? Right? Because if you lock yourself into the label of I'm a coffee drinker, then you're limiting yourself to the options that are in front of you. I personally love living myself, living, in infinite possibilities, right? And one thing that I used to do all the time, like years and years ago, like back in 2010, 2011, was I would get myself stuck in the paradox of space and time and parallel realities and destiny and free will, to the point where I would take something on my desk, typically a pen, and I would throw it across the room just randomly throughout my day, like kind of like a crazy person. And the reason why I would do this was I wanted to switch up my reality. I knew that by making a different choice in that moment, the butterfly effect. All of a sudden, the rest of my day, I am now living in a parallel reality because I wasn't going to do that in the reality that I was currently in. Then I would get myself into the paradox loop of, but was I always destined to take that pen and throw it across the room? And was this a reality that I was always going to be in, regardless of making that choice? Was the choice predestined? So you kind of get yourself in a loop there, but making different choices in the moment that your programming and your autopilot weren't already going to make. That hops us into a parallel reality. When we hop into a parallel reality that goes above and beyond our autopilot, anything is possible. That's when we get into that flux. But in order to be in wave state, in order to be in this realm of flux where nothing is really scheduled or destined for you, you also have to be in a place of trust, right? You can't be in a place of fear when you're in flux, or else you're going to instantaneously manifest that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you made me think of here was that in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, he writes that if you can see the cycles, you can read the future. You can know exactly what's going to happen because you know how the waves are going. So it's interesting almost to think of like the way that you approached the pen, which actually when you said it, I was like, what could I throw right now? And I was like, no, I need my mic and I don't want to splash my tea on the ground. So, but the thing was, it was like when you had the thought initially to change up your reality by randomly throwing your pen, like that thought and intention would have like entered you into the new reality where that can happen even before you physically did it. So and now you're kind of like the future could have been predicted, that it's like there's a 15% chance that she's going to throw her pen sometime in the next 15 minutes, sort of like you could kind of follow it if you were looking at it from a bigger perspective, I think.
Yes, and it's funny that you bring this up because this isn't how I channel, but this is how I look into the future, right? So if, say, for example, a client comes to me and says, I don't do any client sessions anymore, but this is kind of how I used to work. If a client comes to me and says, I've got this job or I've got this job, right? It's not up to me to tell them, well, this job is going to be better for you, because in that moment, I'm overriding their free will, right? So what I say is I'll look into both possibilities and opportunities for you, and I'll tell you what's going to be encompassed within each of those parallel realities. So I take a look at job A and take a look at basically the next year in job A, and I take a look at job B and the next year for them in job B, and I let them know, okay, well, this has more challenges, but this also has more rewards in it as well, or, and I kind of go into the details. So for me, I look at my life as cycles, right? I look at my life as, well, I've got a contract with this cup of tea for the next 20 minutes, right? How is that going to benefit my life? Yeah. And so it's very interesting, and tapping into those parallel timelines and taking a look at how this is going to affect my life. And I think I used to be borderline obsessed with having all of that knowledge and information. And then I got bored. And it was very similar to me lucid dreaming every night. I got bored. It's like, okay, cool. Now what? Now what do I want to do? Do I want to fly? Do I want to be invisible? Do I want to, astral travel around? And it got boring. I'm like, I'm already making all of my choices in my waking life. I don't want to make even more choices in my dream life. And so knowing everything in the waking life and what's about to happen and how that's going to affect me, it just got boring. So now I live my life in this moment of waitful anticipation and waiting for that surprise, no matter what it may be. And that's just a more exciting way to live in my books.
Interesting. I really like the way that you described of just like looking at potentials, because this is something that I think, when it comes to psychics or channeling and tarot reading, tea leaf reading, whatever, people have this perspective that it's like, well, it's like, here's your card or your reading, and it's just like this definitive thing that's going to happen. And yet, much like I feel like when Neo meets the Oracle in the Matrix, she's like, don't mind the vase, and then he breaks it, and she's like, what's really gonna bake your noodle is would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything. So it's like the reading instigates a new vibration, and then it's something for you to play with more consciously, as it's like the reading itself is like expanding your consciousness into potential. And this is even how you started the World War III channel or channeling video that you did of just being like, look, this isn't definitive. I'm just looking at the potential realities that we're stepping into. And so, this is something that I wanted to ask you about too, of, you're talking about like the breakdown of the old system, and the old system only served, that top 1% kind of thing. And then I wonder, moving forward, there's a lot of this talk of like the Great Reset, this sort of conspiracy of, from the World Economic Forum and the big businesses of the world being like, all right, we're going to make a new reality for everyone. And I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this and the sort of this, it's like, is the next phase of human existence going to be any better for people than the last system? It's a concern that a lot of people have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good question. So once again, it's hard to say that this is the ultimate end goal, because collectively we've got 8 billion projected realities, right? All being fed maybe an illusion within the matrix to co-create the reality that we see now. And the more and more people that wake up and kind of break away from the everyday matrix and being fed all of this information to co-create, we're now creating this other reality, right? And that's where we have the 3D individuals, the 5D individuals, and the splitting of the vibrations on this planet and the Mandela effects, and it all kind of coalesces. So right now we have this battleground, right? And it's all really behind the scenes. We don't really see it at face value. And the battleground is, say, the cabal or the shadow government, or the ones who have had control for quite some time, are pushing their agendas. And if anything, they're scared right now. They are so scared because of the vibrational shift. They are so scared because people are waking up, and they have a reason to be scared. I've always said that on top of our power of free will, which is our ultimate power as human beings, right? Free will to choose, free will to think. So far, so good. We also have the power in the numbers, right? So our numbers, I mean, if we, boots on the ground, if we were to protest something, we can create real change, and even with the election that just passed, it's like, if everyone in America just crossed out both names on the ballot and said, I choose not to vote, but make that, announced, right? We have to reform the system, right? If enough of us stand up and say no, we have to reform, right? We have the numbers to do that. We just don't realize that we have the numbers, right? So we've got the old system really pushing their new world elite agendas, and a lot of people are worried about that, only because they're focusing on that, only because all of that information is being exposed. I'm not worried about it, because I've known basically my whole life that the system is corrupt, that they're hiding a lot from us. But people are just waking up to this information now, and they're like, oh no, this is just starting to happen. And it's not. This has been going on for, basically all of humanity since the fall of Atlantis, right? And then on the other hand, we've got the awakening, we've got the ascension. And for the people who are in the middle, maybe they're awakening, but they're still a little bit fear-based. They're kind of in 4D, right? This weird liminal realm. We really need them. We really need this middle ground to focus on the positive, because it is their focus, consciously and intentionally, that is creating that collective reality, right? So when I see even my own people watching my videos having a lot of fear and harboring that, I always have to remind them, you are creating whatever it is that you're focusing on. So both of these realities in parallel are coexisting, yes, but it's what's going to happen the fastest. What we focus on is going to be what creates, right, the fastest. So I believe eventually, yeah, I mean, in the next couple of years, we're going to completely collapse the system. And that does mean the financial system, because it has been extremely corrupt. And I think we're going to move into a brand new system. And I believe 100%, hands down, without a doubt, regardless of when it happens, it's going to happen. It is happening, and it's going to benefit the entire collective. And I believe that so firmly. And right now, where the the light workers are, where the white hats are, whatever you want to call them, right behind the scenes. They're just waiting. It's like everyone's holding their breath right now to say, when do we release free energy technology? When do we release all the cancer cures? When do we release all of the solutions that are going to solve all of the biggest problems? We're just holding back. We're waiting until basically the cabal falls a little bit more, until all of these things are released. And I think that once again, it's going to happen in the next couple of years, without a doubt.
Interesting. That's very interesting, because it's like, even looking at the financial system, what I've at least what I've been privy to, or like what I've learned, is it looks like the old system is collapsing, but that like a new one is sort of being prepared that we would move into, and maybe it would be more harmonious for everybody, but still created by those same powers, like just moving from one state to another. That's like a little bit better,
Yeah. This brings up a really interesting point. What was the example of this? Oh yeah. Okay, so when I initially asked the Galactic Federation Security Council about the virus, right? What they said was, oh, we've been watching this for years now, for many years. This was created, many years ago. And I said, oh, okay. And instantly for me, that shifted my perspective of, oh, so say the elite of this world, the shadow government of this world, believe that they're in control and that they have all the power and that they, but essentially at a bigger extent, they're also playing into the collective, I guess, contracts of what this world needed to go through in order to ascend and awaken. So the Galactic Federation is super chill about everything that's happening right now because it's happening for our benefit. The amount of people that have awakened in 2020 alone because of what has gone down is insurmountable. It's insane, right? It's like I'm getting people every day saying, oh yeah, I just found your channel, or I just woke up, or I just started thinking about aliens like last week, and they're already here, right? It's just like, it's exponential growth because of what we're seeing. So when you're talking about this kind of new world elite, financial system that I've also heard about, I do believe that system can roll out, but essentially it's going to be taken back over in a way by, say, the higher powers that are here for our collective good, like the Galactic Federation and the beings that are here for our evolution. So once again, it's like, it's all good up there. I mean, as far as the Galactic Federation is concerned, I mean, they're loving it. They're loving everything that's unfolding right now. They're so relaxed. And that just calms me right down, because we get so trapped and so caught up in all of the projections and all of the things and all of the fears that we don't realize that this is actually all happening for our good.
I'm really happy you spoke to that, because that really mirrors for a long time I've kind of looked at it and going, well, it's like at the highest level of creation, God is benevolent, spirit is benevolent. So even if like there's this, Illuminati power control structure, it's not the top of the pyramid. That's not the ultimate high end. And so go with it, like with everything that's happening, like focus on your evolution seems to be the best choice that any one of us can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I even get some haters as well, of course, and they always mention, they're like, well, you're just a Galactic Federation puppet and you don't realize that you're feeding into their agendas and it's all evil. And this is what I say, it's not up to me to say what is good and what is bad, right? I mean, I just have my own perceptions. I'm just living my own life. But I said, even if the Galactic Federation is evil or bad, there's got to be some good, because we innately live in a binary universe. There is light and dark. There's high vibration and low vibration. So we can't have low vibration and low vibration. It just doesn't equate to the actual reality of this universe. So even if the GFL is low vibration or bad, then there's got to be some sort of good. There's got to be some sort of light, right? So I just kind of bring that perception in as well of, the step down from source is the polarity. It's the binary within this universe, because that's how source created movement and growth and flow, is through challenge, right? I mean, I remember years ago when I started channeling, I had so many questions. What's the purpose of life? Why are we here? Why are humans important? You know, all of those things. And one of my questions was, Source, I mean, you are all knowing, all loving. You know, why on earth, why in the universe would you ever want to forget all of your memories and incarnate as a bug or a plant or a human or a dog? And the response that I got was, Elizabeth, imagine as a human that you had everything. You had all knowledge, all money, all social, interactions, all stuff that you could ever imagine. You had everything that you could ever imagine. How long would it take you to get bored? And I'm like, oh, yeah, pretty quickly. If you had everything, if you had nothing that you wanted, no challenges, no needs, none of that, of course, you would want to start exploring and experiencing and being and creating and shifting and pushing yourself. I know I would want to do that. So that explanation from Source really made sense as to why Source would incarnate as lower vibrational beings and separate and polarize.
It sounds exactly like what you said about why you didn't want to lucid dream anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, yeah, it's
I've been there,
identical.
done that. Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing. So you speak with the Galactic Federation of Light, and can you describe, like, at least from your awareness, like who makes up this Galactic Federation?
Yeah, totally. So I went to university and I was studying global political economy. So for me, it was like, where's the power being held within this world, right? So it was during my studies studying global politics when I got introduced to the Galactic Federation for the first time back in 2011, and they invited me to one of their meetings. And, I was kind of pissed, to be honest, to find out that there is a government structure organization. They don't really like to be called a government, but an organization system similar to the government system on this planet. For me, it was like, you guys are eighth, ninth, 10th dimensional beings, and you need an organizational system. You need a structure. Like, I thought we were going to get better than this. Right. So now I realize that they're really, existing just to kind of keep the low vibrational energies in line. They don't ever want to take over low vibrational energies in this universe, but they just want to make sure that everyone is abiding by the laws of the universe, right? The law of non-intervention, the law of free will, those kind of things are really important. So they're just here to keep balance, really. But I was still upset that they just hadn't figured it out to a better extent. So, yeah, I mean, the Galactic Federation was basically created a long time ago by benevolent beings who really just wanted unification, unity, oneness, balance within the universe. And a lot of the low vibrational beings in the universe are very service to self. So they're greedy, they'll take more than they need. They're, and they create a lot of the wars and the battles and the things. And that's when the GFL kind of steps in to create that balance. I mean, the Galactic Federation is made of an infinite number of beings. I couldn't even begin to explain. I mean, there's weird like gelatin beings, weird little troll beings, there's huge beings, there's beings with horns, it's infinite. The ones that I mostly connect with who are a part of the Galactic Federation, the Palladians for sure, they're everywhere, all over the GFL. Also the Greys, but that's more of a personal connection, but they're a part of the Galactic Federation. And they do a lot of the genetic stuff with the hybrids and the new humans on this planet, but also just hybridization and genetic splicing. And then I also have started recently dealing with a lot of the Octurians who, one of the councils at least that I deal with, they deal with timeline shifting as well. So they talk a lot about the different timelines and the shifting of the timelines and what we can expect or really not expect on this planet. So I work with their council. And who else do I work with? I've worked a lot with the Anunnaki, but more so regarding ancient knowledge and wisdom on this planet. And then actually opening up a lot of the portals and the vortexes on this planet that have been dormant for quite some time. And it was the Anunnaki who really implanted a lot of that ancient wisdom here. Anyway, yeah. So, I mean, I just work with a variety of different beings who are all very interesting, and they all kind of have their part to play and their pieces of information that I like to relay to humanity.
Wow, that's so cool. Because you mentioned the Anunnaki, I don't know if you've seen, we have a series called the Sumerian Epic, and it's like a fully animated, like Nibiru Anunnaki movie based on, it's like a lot of the interpretations of the Sumerian tablets and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on, or even just like confirm or deny or share what you have learned about the creation of humanity. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Anunnaki creating a slave species, this and that. But like, what do your guides tell you about this story, or our origins?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and this is one of the other things that when I first started channeling, it's the first thing I wanted to know. Who are we really? Like, where did we come from? So, one of my abilities, rather than just channeling and that clairsentience, is astral traveling. And I started to kind of work within past life regression. And after a while, I just started regressing myself into past lifetimes. And then I realized that I didn't have to actually be linked to a past lifetime to see past lifetimes of humans and ancient human history. So I started to explore, ancient Greece and ancient Egypt and all of these things. So it was really cool. And so I also want to mention too, before I go into what I understand as our origin story, that I don't do any external research, right? So as much as I love spirit science for opening everyone up and expanding their consciousness, I personally haven't really dove into any of your content or information because it was told to me at a young age not to do any research into the stuff that I channel, specifically not to muddle my own perceptions and my own information, to keep it as pure as possible, right? And I respect that. So what I've channeled is, yes, in fact, the Anunnaki were one of the first higher intelligent beings on this planet, but the reptilians were here long before the Anunnaki were here. They were kind of like the intelligent species walking around with the dinosaurs kind of thing. And this is kind of why the reptilians fight so hard for the control of this planet, because essentially they believe that this planet is theirs. And you know what? I don't blame them for believing that this planet was theirs. However, what I saw was that it was always contracted within the Galactic Federation that this planet was going to harbor the species of human beings that were going to basically help the universe ascend. It's really wild. I guess I'll probably start with that piece because it's a higher perspective than going into the Anunnaki. So essentially, millions of years ago, there was an oracle being. I don't really know what her species was, who lived and existed with the Galactic Federation. And she had this vision, and she said, relayed to the councils, she said, one day there is going to be a species that is going to liberate us from polarity. And the Galactic Federation is like, okay, cool, just kind of left it at that. And then eventually they started to realize, and this oracle started to get more images and visuals in understanding that this species is going to be some sort of hybrid. And they started to realize that with their highly evolved genetic ability to splice different DNAs, they could create this masterful species that has all of the different genomes of all of these different beings all throughout the universe, right? So basically, the Galactic Federation said, if we can take some of the highest vibrational beings of the universe and their DNA, and some of the lowest vibrational beings of the universe and their DNA, and we put them together to create this one species, that species can be the living, breathing, walking, talking peace treaty between the highest and the lowest vibrational beings of the universe. Now, for many, many millions of years, we've had these peace treaties between the low vibrations and the high vibrations that have been created by the Galactic Federation. And these peace treaties are like, okay, sit down, sign a piece of paper. But sometimes the peace treaties last 2 weeks, sometimes they last 10,000 years, but eventually they always collapse. There's nothing there that's rooting the lower vibrational beings into really caring about the peace treaty. They're like, what's in it for us, right? So this prophecy was to prophesize human beings as this next peace treaty. we are the children of the reptilians. We are the children of the Anunnaki. We are the children of the Palladians and the Octarians and so forth and so on. And by doing that, by being that, there's a little bit more anchoring there, and there's a little bit more care, right? And so that was the plan. I mean, that was the prophecy back then, like thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, was the prophecy from the Galactic Federation. And then all of a sudden, they found the perfect planet, being planet Earth, and they noticed that planet Earth was already inhabited by the reptilians, but it was perfect, because the reptilians are going to want to anchor themselves into this species that the GFL already knew that the Anunnaki were going to come and inhabit planet Earth for their own means, because there's a bunch of gold here. Like, they could see all of the timelines, which is really cool, right? So there's always that higher perspective. So here the Anunnaki come, and the reptilians are pissed that they're there. And so the Anunnaki and the reptilians broker this deal, saying, look, okay, you know, if the Anunnaki are going to create this slave species, human beings, and there was many different, like Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 of the humans, a lot of the generations had different things that were wrong with them. So it was kind of like they kind of worked on it, worked on us, I guess. And so the reptilians came in and said, hey, like, we want to be a part of this too. Like, you're creating this freaking garbage species on our planet. Like, we want in. And so then the reptilians started splicing their DNA with human beings as well. And then all of a sudden, you know, we get to our generation, which are able to procreate and think for ourselves and expand and those kind of things. And we were kind of getting a little bit out of control for the Anunnaki's liking. So there was a scene very visually that I went into. It was so cool. It was back in ancient Egypt, and I don't really know what time it was in ancient Egypt, but it was back in ancient Egypt. And at this time, we had the giant Anunnaki that were walking around. We had the, what do I call them? The sons and daughters of the Anunnaki I call them demigods, right? Because they're just kind of half and half. And then we also had the reptilians walking, like fully walking around, and they're quite large as well. And so we've got like 20, 30 feet beings. We've got 10-foot beings. We've got 9-foot beings or whatever. And so I come into this scene of ancient Egypt. The Anunnaki are, of course, revered as the gods. And then the reptilians are kind of like the managers of the humans in a sense. And that was kind of the dynamic. And these 3 huge spaceships come down over ancient Egypt. And the spaceships were of the Galactic Federation. And the Galactic Federation comes down and makes this announcement and says to the Anunnaki, you are no longer allowed to interfere with planet Earth. You are no longer allowed to interfere with human beings, and you've got to get off. And so at that point in time, the Anunnaki got what they wanted, right? They had the gold, they set up their machines and their devices, and they're like, okay, cool, we're done with humans. They're restless anyway, we're gonna get off. So the Anunnaki left very easily, very calmly, and they just, very willingly. The reptilians, however, did not want to leave. They're like, screw that, we're not leaving, this is our planet. And the Galactic Federation said, we'll relocate you. You've got so many different planets in the universe that you can go to. So some of them left. There was a good majority of the reptilians who left with the Galactic Federation, but a lot of them stayed. And the GFL said, if you're going to stay on this planet, then number one, you can't be seen by human beings. You can't interfere. That's what they basically said. So if you're going to be here, you got to go underground, right? So it was the Galactic Federation that actually pushed the reptilian beings underground. This is when the reptilians started to create all of the underground tunnels and the kind of places that they, inhabit even today. And so when they were underground, the reptilians, they were fuming. They were pissed that they had to go underground. And that's when they started to create their devices, machines, technology, genetic splicing. I'm not sure what you call it, but that's when they started to be able to shapeshift, possess, or take over, a human form. And that's when they started the lineage and the bloodline of cool, we won't be seen by human beings because we'll be one of them. And that's when they started, with the pharaohs and whatnot, and shape shifting into the human form, and then all of the bloodlines, right, and keeping the bloodlines really pure, for their purpose of kind of having and maintaining that control. So yeah, I mean, and here we are today.
Wow. That's so, I mean, what a story. It's like you've added another dimension to the stories we've been, I mean, because we've been animating those for nigh 8 years now, like telling that story in sort of different ways, just but like the fall of Atlantis and stuff. And everything that you've just described like fits really well into that entire picture. And you've never learned about that from anywhere? Like never read a Sumerian tablet or heard about it from anyone?
No, never. And I didn't add in the part of Atlantis, but Atlantis was really the injection of the very high interdimensional beings, like the Palladian DNA. And that's kind of when some of that genetic splicing. So it was so interesting how it was prophesized such a long time ago from the GFL that we were meant to be this peace treaty, this masterful species. One of my biggest questions back then when I started channeling interdimensionals was, why are you guys even here? Like, we are this lowly third dimension ant-like species, and there's trillions upon third dimensional species, out there in the universe. Why us? Why here? Why now? And they didn't tell me for many years that we were this hybrid species. And I knew that already, but that we were the peace treaty. But it was so interesting how they didn't necessarily even need to create us, in a sense, on their ships. We were kind of created very organically, and then the Atlanteans coming through, and the Palladians and the Octurians coming through and splicing their DNA with us as well, and then disseminating that throughout the planets. We've got all these different, hybrid genetic, bloodlines running around. And throughout our ascension, our awakening, and our evolving of our vibrational frequency, our vibration actually triggers different DNA aspects and DNA traits to open up in our body, right? So maybe you hit a certain vibrational frequency and you've got a high percentage of Palladian DNA, all of a sudden that Palladian DNA gets expressed, right? So it's just, and it's crazy how science even tells us that we work with 9%, 8% of our DNA, right? It's like crazy. What, the rest of the 90% is junk? Just don't worry about that stuff. I believe that that's our hybrid DNA, and I believe that it's just dormant, waiting for us to utilize it. I believe everything that I can do, the rest of the world can do, right? We all have these powers innately within us.
Mm-hmm. So speaking then to how you do what you do, how do you do what you do?
It's so difficult. Like, I kind of equate it to, someone who's got like Asperger's, and just has this brilliant mind, and you put a mathematical equation in front of them and they have the answer. But when you ask them, well, how did you get there? How did you get to the answer? It's like, I don't know. I just know. Right. So how do I channel? It's very difficult for me to explain, how I do that. I believe everyone, once again, can do this. When I was younger, when I was a kid, I was very psychic. I was very tuned in, seeing ghosts and spirits and chakras and auras, and even tuned into past lifetimes where I was a breatharian or I was a yogi, and I was trying to teach, my friends in 6th grade how to levitate by closing their eyes and sitting on a pillow. Like, so whether I knew that that was a past lifetime or not, I was really tapped in at a young age, which is good because that's also allowed me to close my third eye when I don't need to be open. But I also had major social anxiety as a kid. I couldn't go to public restaurants. I'd get too overwhelmed by everyone's energy. So I was too open. And throughout being awakened and having that third eye open for most of my life, I've now been able to close it and open it at will super easily. But it really just takes listening, right? I think the biggest thing that takes us away from our abilities to tap in and channel and gain access to infinite amounts of information just sitting in our collective Akash is distraction, right? I mean, there's so many aspects of this life in this world that distract us, that take us away from that infinite knowledge. And it's obviously created that way for a reason. so that we forget how powerful we are, right? And that's the craziest thing, is that we've got this 1% of society that knows how incredibly powerful we are as hybrid beings. And that's why they kind of project all of this distraction. Oh, look over here, look over here. You know, you're not actually that powerful. And that's how the entire society is built, is just to take us away from that. So it just really takes listening and separating yourself from the matrix and tuning in, and also asking the right questions is what really navigates me throughout all of the information. I akin it to, I call myself a universal Google, right? And like I said, we can all do this. So you're sitting in front of Google, the search engine, and you're like, okay, I've got all information on this planet. I could tap into anything. I could tap into astral traveling. I could tap into how to grow a tree. You know, I could tap into quantum physics. What do I want to tap into in Google? But it takes you asking the right question in order for the search results to come up, and then navigating through the search results. It's very similar. Once you open up to infinite knowledge and wisdom, or you connect yourself purely to source, you let go of distraction, it takes you asking the right question. Most of us open up, we attune ourselves to that higher vibration, and we're just waiting. Okay, I'm ready for infinite knowledge to come through. And you're going to be waiting forever if you don't ask a question, you know? So that's kind of what we have to do, is that navigation piece of, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want to know? It's all there for you, but what do you want?
Wow. I think you kind of answered my next question too, because I was gonna ask, like, what can someone do to get started if they wanted to really try? I mean, you've really outlined a lot there. Do you feel like, is there a specific, like, just like consistency on meditation, diet, exercise, like specific things that you do that helps, or that could help someone who might be struggling to bridge into that world?
There are so many, like, for me, I'm kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none, right? And I'm a big proponent of, don't get stuck in one modality and try it all, because everyone's system, everyone's vibration is going to attune to something different. So I can't sit here and saying, oh, well, if you eat oranges every day, your third eye is going to awaken. It just doesn't work like that, right? So what I recommend is you try all modalities, you try all of the things, you try all of the different diets, or you just kind of feel it out, but really listen to your body, listen to your soul. It will navigate you to where you need to go. But the number one thing is always setting an intention, right? So if this month, especially, full moon just passed, you could ask yourself, this month, I want to raise my awareness, or this month, I want to unlock my DNA, or this month, I want to really know what my mission is, right? And on a per month basis, you set that intention, and all of a sudden, the right article, the right conversation, the right, experience will come into your vibration. But if you're like, I'm just open to all of it, it's going to be very difficult to pick up on the subtleties of everything that's coming in all at the same time. So really narrowing in that focus, and then, working with the experiences and the tools that come in after you narrow in that focus on a per month basis or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's cool. So I guess, like, we've talked about so many things here, and in the sort of the spirit of bringing it all to a unified, beautiful conclusion, what would you say is, like, do you have like a message, or if you could tell the world one thing, like, what would be the most important thing to share with everybody right now?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I would say ultimately, it's this understanding and this realization of how powerful you really are, right? We get so sucked into being a mother, or being a wife, or a husband, or, being this 9 to 5 worker, or whatever your labels are, that we actually don't really experience our magical powers on a day-to-day basis. So understanding that you are a hybrid being full of infinite number of potential, and you've got DNA within you that's just waiting to express itself. And all that takes is raising your vibration, observing the reality around you in a different perception, understanding that all of these little things that irritate or frustrate or trigger you, are actually all just illusions. Understanding that this entire lifetime that you're in right now is actually an illusion in its own right. Understanding that you've got a mission on this planet, that you've got a purpose upon being here, that you are here for a reason, that you volunteered your soul to be here at this time for a reason. This is one of the most important times this planet and subsequently this entire universe has ever seen. We're about to change everything. So don't get sucked into fear. Don't get sucked into the illusion. Don't get sucked into your own impermanent existence. Take a look at the bigger picture and understand that there are so many other things at play than just what you can perceive. And ultimately, all of these things are at play to better humanity as a whole and to bring us together into collective consciousness to evolve us to this next vibrational frequency.
I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. That was really, really amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So much fun. So much fun. I love when I can just kind of riff on all of the information. Like there's just so much, but it's so beautiful when it just kind of all weaves together. And typically it just takes the right person, being present. So this is a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For like anybody who's listening in, if they want to find you, where can they go to really tap into all of your magic?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my website is kind of like the main hub, elizabethapril.com. I'm starting to release a lot of courses out there in my School of Awakening. These courses are really beautiful and really financially attainable as well. And then I've got my YouTube, tons of free information on there, and then Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. But it's just Elizabeth April across all social media platforms. So yeah, so that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to put the links down below in the author comments of the YouTube and the podcast places, wherever this podcast ends up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Please be blessed and keep on channeling. I'm really excited to tune in to the next time you go live.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a beautiful day. And everybody, thanks for watching or listening.